Started. I know Commissioner Lanier is here as well. You want to do a 5-second? Thank you. Hello. All right. Good morning and welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting. We have a full agenda today, and we're going to start off today with our fire chief. So I'm going to ask Chief Lehman to come up, talk to us about AAA of Michigan Grant Fund for Traffic Safety Equipment. So Commissioners, this isn't an action item, so we are here to hear a presentation, and I'll let the Chief introduce everyone. So welcome, Chief. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. Chief Tennant, I'm going to allow Chief Tennant to do this presentation and make the introductions.
All right. Welcome,
This
Chief.
is Steve Gaffo from AAA who awarded us a grant, a Fire Marshal Doctor behind him, and Assistant Chief Brad Brown in the middle, and Deputy Chief Ron Tennant. So I just want to take a moment to thank AAA for their generous donation of the grant. Last fall, I was made aware that they made traffic safety funds possible. A real big hazard for emergency responders out in the community is operating on our highways when there's an emergency. And quite frankly, if you ask just about any police, fire, EMS, or tow person, they're far more worried about working in that environment than they are at their typical event, a structure fire or a medical emergency and such. And Grand Rapids, we've been fortunate over the years to be on kind of the cutting edge nationwide of some of our initiatives to provide for the safety of our responders on the highways, our Utility 2 project and our quick clearance operation. But one area we've kind of haven't looked at a whole lot is our basic equipment that a lot of other equipment or agencies have. So I was made aware of this grant. It was within the realm of their funding that we could purchase 120 federal compliant traffic safety cones and 15 of the pink emergency incident scene ahead signs so that we can equip all of our fire companies with that equipment to be consistent with all the response agencies nationwide. We're trying to work toward that. I was made aware of this opportunity as part of my role with the State Traffic Incident Management Action Team. I'm currently chair of that, and because of the city's support of that effort, that's one payback that we get for that. So we really appreciate it, and we're thankful for AAA to offering those funds to us and to be able to provide that equipment for our safety.
Yeah, we're thankful just to continue being part of the community and being able to give back and partner with the Grand Rapids to make sure that everyone's safe on the roadways.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you for your support. Really appreciate that.
Thanks so much.
Would you be willing to come down for a picture
Yes,
with the
absolutely.
presentation?
Steve's here.
Awesome.
Maybe in front of Doug.
You got to accept a big check last night.
You did?
So it's awkward, but
From the other way?
yeah.
Wonderful.
Do not photo bomb from J&H Family Stores. Never know what to do with them afterwards. Just put it in the closet.
I did not photobomb anybody.
Yeah, you have to watch this one.
The rabbit ears are going to look good.
Right.
Did not photobomb.
All right. So next, that will take us to our second presentation today. And we have Suzanne Schultz from our Planning Department, and she's going to provide a Planning Commission annual report for us.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. This is just going to be really super quick because I just wanted to let you know that we're transmitting this from the Planning Department. It's in the Planning Commission bylaws that we provided a report. Some of you may be going, I don't remember receiving this.
That's
in
exactly
years
what
past.
I thought when I read my packet.
Yes, and that is due to capacity constraints of the Planning Department. That this is one of those things that has been continually pushed off over the years because we're constantly challenged to try to keep up, and so it's one of those things that fell off the plate, to be honest. So we're trying to get back in. We actually have a contract employee right now with the department, and so this was one of her tasks for this summer. Just really briefly, we have Planning Commission cases. We're continuing to remain very busy. The Planning Commission meets 2 times a month, except for in November and December. They heard approximately 97 special land use applications in the past year. 93 of those were approved, so we have a 96% approval rate. for those special land uses. The special land use process does allow the public to provide comment, and then for additional conditions can be added to the approval. So, for example, we've had people come and talk about the desire for a fence so that headlights don't shine into their bedroom windows or other things. And that process does allow for the Planning Commission to grant approval subject to certain conditions. And so they do try to find ways to be customer friendly and work with the applicants to get to approvals. A good portion of those approvals were for alcohol uses. We've talked a lot about alcohol, particularly around gas stations. The state law changed to allow gas stations to sell beer and wine, and so they had 14 requests for gas stations and all were approved. What they did do, however, is limit the amount of alcohol sales at those locations to cooler doors and square footage, so that they don't turn into party stores and a full-blown. It was intended to add another beverage selection for customers. Churches, ground floor office were also areas where we saw requests. Mostly the higher ones, though, for parking related. 9 cases for parking as a principal use were considered. And then density, to increase density from multifamily to 2-family uses, or to allow higher densities. There were 9 requests for that. They also review planned sign programs if something doesn't quite fit within the zoning ordinance, but we want to allow the types of uses, or we have multi-tenants. You see this a lot where it might be a shopping center, and instead of looking at each business, we're looking at an entire campus or an entire site, and so that's when they take sign-related requests. And then zone changes, they heard 8 zone changes, which is actually a good number from the standpoint that we don't want to see too many rezoning requests. That means that our zone districts are really out of whack. But the 8 cases that we've heard, most of those were planned redevelopment districts. So there were substantial projects that required a rezoning, and that's really the best process to take those on when we have a significant change. We also took into consideration text amendments, both for housing now and medical marijuana. So they've had all of those things at your table. You also recently approved adult daycare and group home child care. And then we've debated the alcohol pieces, which has resulted in the SEPTED ordinance that we're currently working with neighborhood improvement co-compliance and GRPD on, and we've started to have meetings where we've scheduled weekly meetings with them to make sure that that's done before the end of the year at your request. The Board of Zoning Appeals, we did throw some of those in just so you can see the volume that they hear. This is, again, seeing 17 cases down from 33 cases in FY14. We have really tried to lessen the amount of requests needing to go to Board of Zoning Appeals using more administrative approvals so that it's more customer friendly. There's some cases where we just can't do that, but we've really tried to get the number of requests down in front of the board as much as possible. Just by way of example, before we adopted the ordinance in 2007, which was completely revised, we used to have 2 meetings a month with Board of Zoning Appeals with 8 to 10 items on each agenda. So getting down to that number is pretty significant. When we look at the Planning Department administrative caseload on page 6, you see accessory dwellings. We do a lot of reviews, a lot of administrative departures. There's all these other kind of odd things that come through, temporary events. We also are in charge of historic preservation, so that's in there. So we just wanted to give you some of those numbers. And then the long-range planning side, I think, is really notable. We just gave the Planning Commission a tour of where we're working on area-specific plans during their retreat last Thursday. We took them to Hartside, and they were able to talk to the neighborhood association organizers in Hartside. One thing of note that was really interesting is that they mentioned that they found a letter from 1970 talking about a request to add lighting to South Division. So. So thank you for that, for approving that and supporting that request from the neighborhood. They've been at it a long time. Then we also had Letitia Lipscomb. Letitia has been working in the planning department as an advocate for the neighborhood. She lives in the neighborhood, and she talked about that involvement and how they're now hearing voices that previously were unheard in Hartside. We took them down to South Division. If you haven't had a chance to go into the pop-up shop that we have on South Division right behind the BRT station in Burton Heights, Leonard Van Drynen, that's his store now. He bought the Triple X bookstore that we've had that was there for decades and all boarded up. He has a brand new storefront on it, and we have that right now as a community meeting space to talk about the plan process. The planning commissioners were able to meet 2 of our community ambassadors from the neighborhood, one of which came up to us during the kickoff event we had in Garfield Park with 1,000 people who showed up. And she said, how do I get involved? And so now she's actually hired by the planning department as a temp staff person to do outreach in the neighborhood. So they were able to meet with them and hear that story. We had a bus tour. Layla Islani talked about Southtown and just briefly shared some of the work that's coming out of Southtown with them as well. And then we finished up by going to look at Diamond Place, which if you have not had a chance to tour yet, I would encourage you to do so. Third Coast Development is doing that. And we talked about Michigan Street Corridor Plan implementation. And it was really fun hearing Brad Roseley talk about this design of this building wouldn't have happened without the input from the community. We actually had a design charrette during the plan process where the community laid out what they thought would work, and they were very clear on wanting to have mixed income housing, a mix of affordable and market rate. They wanted a grocery store, they wanted a public meeting place with some green on it, and all of those things have been incorporated into this project. So he specifically goes back to the plan process as the origination for the ideas and for the work. So that was really fun to be able to share that with them, and they toured the Gordon Food Service space as well as several of the units. We've also been working on river restoration. We have Jay Steffen, who's full-time on that, working towards implementation with all the permitting agencies, all the easements and all the licensing requirements for that. And so he continues to be the key liaison of the city with them. And then finally, for awards, we received the 2018 Silver National Planning Achievement Award for the Vital Streets Plan. We've also been notified that we're receiving the Michigan Association Planning Award for Transportation Planning, which we'll be accepting in September. And then we were part of the team for Redevelopment Ready Community Certification. The internal process improvements, we've been continuing to work on that, and it's listed there. And then training, we've been much more active in training. We've heard from the City Commission, you want more training of planning commissioners and different opportunities. So we provided 22 training opportunities to the Planning Commission, both through webinars as well as signups, and offering them that we would pay for if they wanted to do citizen planner or anything like that. And so we've been continuing to offer training opportunities for them, including a scholarship program for the Michigan State University Extension 6-week citizen planner program. We also made scholarships available. We had 8 scholarships available to the public to go through that process as well. We're hoping to be able to cultivate future planning commission members in that way, where we have people who learn the language and the philosophy of how we do planning. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's other information in here, including attendance, which has been a question, and then some comment on Planning Commission bylaws. But are there any questions about that?
All right, commissioners, I'll open up for questions. Any questions, Commissioner?
Yes, thank you, Suzanne, for this report. I think it would be, and I can reach out too, but it would be great if some of us could tour Diamond Place, because this is what we're looking for, is these mixed income opportunities. So it'd be great to do. And you mentioned the 8 scholarships. Could you send us some information about that? Has anybody taken you up on that?
Yeah, we did have people take us up on that. So I can send you a list of who participated.
Yeah, because I mean, as we look at appointments, it'd be just good to know who has followed through on that, and then also to offer for anybody who we think might be a prospective planning commissioner. That would be great.
We can certainly do that. The one other piece I'd add is that the planning department is, well, actually design and development. We are going through a strategic planning process right now. In fact, this morning I met with all of our building officials. We are going to be looking at both the building inspection side, long-range planning and development review components. It will include focus group meetings with developers, as well as we're talking about staff ideas. One of the interesting things, I guess, about the department is that, we had the peak, I think, of when we had staff was in '99. And then with budget cuts and everything, and then as we have been ramping up because of development and other work, you hire as needed for whatever space is at the moment without really looking strategically at how we're using all of our personnel and all of our resources to bear in the best way possible. And so in the next 3 months, that is the goal, that's my work, is to do that strategic plan with staff and our customers to come up with organizational structure that makes sense, and also looking forward to the master plan, how do we best resource that and think that through. We've had challenges with hiring contract staff or temps because of 11-month periods where we have breaks, and trying to figure out ways in which we can do better structures to support the work that we're doing.
And then one other question. I noticed on your planning commission cases that it was the special land uses that have been coming through most often.
Yes.
And just wondering what that is about. And I know that after you get several cases that are similar and then they're approved, they start to drop off and be done by administrative approval. It'd be great to get a better sense of, at some point, what those are. So we're prepared for that as well.
Can certainly do that. I mean, the alcohol one is the biggest one, by far. And so the question is, are you comfortable with administrative approvals of alcohol uses? And even as staff, I haven't been really comfortable with that. I mean, we have changed restaurants. If it's a full restaurant and they're having alcohol, we now administratively approve that. But if they're particularly convenience stores, or in the case of gas stations, we feel that it's important to still have a public hearing, and that's where most of the requests are for.
Thank you.
Suzanne, can you send the full city commission an updated roster of attendance
Yes.
as of today?
Yeah,
I think we all
definitely
need
do
to take a look at that, because we know that continues to be an issue, and as we get into more critical issues as well as master planning, we're gonna have to take a look at that.
Yep, we can do that.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Anything else, commissioners? All right,
Okay,
thank you. All right, next is a resolution approving the request from Golden Age Brewing LLC for a new small distillery license to be located at 1504 Plainfield Avenue Northeast.
So moved. Support.
So,
All right.
Mayor, I'd like to step out for this one because my children are part owners of this. So I'm
Yes.
gonna-
And Commissioner Kelly plans to abstain, so. All right, so commissioners, any questions about this? City Clerk, you want to tell us anything about this?
No, they have all their approvals they need from all the departments, so they're all set.
Okay, all right. Fellow distiller over there?
The brewery had no license. It's no big deal.
All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And then Commissioner Kelly is abstaining. All right, next that will take us to a resolution authorizing certain special events subject to Chapter 53 of the City Code. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
All right, Ms. Yvette Pittman, you want to tell us about this?
Absolutely. Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
So we are looking at different events that will be occurring throughout the month of September. Besides Art Prize, which everyone is looking forward to, there are still many, many other events that occur throughout our neighborhoods and the downtown area.
All right. Okay. Questions, commissioners?
Just a huge thanks for that. There are lots of good events going on. It's hard to choose anymore what to do.
It's true. It's true, and it's hard to cover the whole city.
Yeah.
All right, any Commissioner?
Just curious, Yvette, were you able to get by the fatherhood piece this weekend? Any idea of how that went? at
I was
Park?
not able to get by that one. We had a couple of larger events going on downtown with Breakaway and the Polish Festival, so I apologize.
That's okay. I'm
I'll
just
follow
curious.
up.
Okay, thank you.
I actually followed Tony Jalifi's Facebook page,
Yeah.
so it looked like they had a good crowd there.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
And it looked hot for a flag football tournament, but it looks like they had a good crowd and a good event. He gave a food count on his Facebook page, so it sounds like they served a lot, like 300 some hot dogs, and I forgot how many slabs of ribs they said. So it looks like they had a good turnout.
Very good.
Nice.
Thank
It
you.
was a very busy weekend.
Yeah.
Yes, which is good. It's good for our city. All right, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next that'll take us to a resolution authorizing funding to support the Diversity Awards in partnership with Art Prize.
So moved.
All right, Mr. Almonte, you want to tell us about this?
Well, this is kind of the legacy of the work that Commissioner Lumpkin, Commissioner White, and Commissioner Lanier to embed diversity within our prize. So we're proud that that event continues. You have a flyer in front of you, and please take a moment to attend that event and share it within your network. So I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, that'll be great. All right, any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, you all can help spread the word on that. All right, next up will take us to a resolution approving a memorandum of understanding with Friends of Grand Rapids Parks.
So moved.
All right, our Parks Director and Stephanie Adams, the Director of Friends of Grand Rapids Parks, is here this morning to talk with us about this.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. David Markwart, Director of Parks and Recreation. It wasn't that long ago, it feels like a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago that the Parks Department was really decimated by the economy here in Grand Rapids, no different than other departments across the country. But what was different here in Grand Rapids is that the Parks Department really was stabilized by the Friends of Grand Rapids organization. When the economy took a turn for the worst, it was Friends that stepped in and really began to fill a huge void in the city, both financially and from a volunteer perspective. And with that in mind, I'm pleased to bring in front of you today a resolution approving a memorandum of understanding between the Department of Parks and Recreation and the Friends of Grand Rapids Parks organization to really reinvigorate that relationship that we've had with them for 10 years now. Their existence, they just celebrated their 10-year anniversary. And really the content of this memorandum includes 4 key areas of work. The first of which is ensuring that we're investing in our parks to the level that we should be. And so Friends is really committing to engaging in that work of fundraising for portions of our park work that we're not able to get to with the millage investments that only go so far. In addition to that, we're looking at volunteerism and stewardship. That's a big component of the work that we're doing. We're always looking for partners and friends and neighbors to come alongside of our work, and Friends has been demonstrating time and again the ability to pull those neighbors and friends along with us and supporting our work. And so that's another key area of the work that we'll be doing together. In addition to that, we're looking at the tree planting and continuing the tree work that we have been doing together. The Mayor's Greening Initiative is a big portion of that work. And we're pleased to have the Friends of Grand Rapids Parks organization supporting that work as well. And then there's the 4th component. It's escaping me.
Activation.
Activation, thank you. Of course, activation. Friends, again, they host some incredible events across the city, some of which include the Barbecue and Beautify series. Those are not only ways in which we can engage our neighbors with the work that we're doing, but Friends is really strategic about engaging in those events and pulling neighbors alongside park improvement projects that we have going on a regular basis. And so they're having conversations with neighbors about how they'd like to see their parks improved and how that can support the millage investment that we're making. So they're out there in mass. We're super appreciative of the work that they're always doing for us. It helps us to go further. It always has, and it always will. And so with that, I'll invite Stephanie to say a few words as well.
Thank you. First, I want to start out by thanking David, being a tremendous leader of our Parks and Rec department for the past 4 years now. Time does fly. I'm excited to have been here for the last 18 months in this role, but we're definitely celebrating our 10-year anniversary, and we couldn't have done that with a strong partnership with not only the city, but our Parks and Rec department. So I want to thank you from the board, myself, our entire team is here, small but mighty team of 5 women who go out and support the Parks and Rec department and in partnership. So we just want to thank you for your continued enthusiasm and passion and support of not only our parks and trees, but also public spaces. We've really enjoyed this relationship. We continue to look at opportunities. We're so excited about this partnership for growth. As David said, our mission is to empower people in our community to help cultivate vibrant parks, trees, and green spaces. And it really is about engaging our citizens and helping them figure out ways to become stewards of their park spaces, as well as to impact the tree canopy goal that we are all working towards. So I want to thank you for that, and just share a couple quick stats so you can see how our partnership already this year and even last year has been really engaging neighbors. We have almost 100 citizen foresters through our tree planting program. We have engaged 625 volunteers this year and over 2,000 volunteer hours. We've almost pruned 1,000 trees this year, so we're excited to continue that. And that partnership that you guys approved with the contract earlier this summer has helped make that happen. We are completing a path in Roosevelt Park with funding that we helped procure through the Cook Foundation. Bike Park is getting additional funding, and we just finished building a brand new park last week at Eastern Park. So thank you for those that came out to see that. So I just want to say thank you for your continued support in this partnership. We are so excited about this official MOU. We know we've been in partnership for a long time, even without the MOU, but this even solidifies it even more, and I think just shows, again, great cities have great parks, and this adds to that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll turn to my colleagues. Commissioner Jones, you want to add anything? You're the city liaison. You serve on the board of Friends of Grand Rapids Parks. I know you've been involved in this MOU discussion for some time now.
No, just quite pleased that we continue to progress, and I think the 10-year anniversary of the celebration that we just had spoke volumes in terms of how the relationship has evolved and how there's obviously quite a bit of work to do going forward. And I'm always reminded by folks, especially folks who visit Grand Rapids, just how surprised they are with the amount of green space that we have. And I just want to continue to be, I guess, rather aggressive in our efforts to, provide as much green space as possible to our residents and throughout our entire city. And so, again, I look forward to the creative and innovative ways in which we can do that, throughout the city.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. And I'll add, you two didn't speak to this, and we don't have partners here from GRPS, but I know that we work closely with GRPS with the playgrounds and greening playgrounds and connecting children to nature, and both David and Stephanie have been instrumental in that relationship as well. So, Commissioner Kelly?
Well, one thing I do want to do is underscore what my colleague Commissioner Jones just said about finding green space throughout the city, and to our colleague Commissioner Lanier's concerns about the Third Ward, really taking a close look at that next year, because we want to make sure that we are being equitable across the city. So respect your wishes that we do that and support that. And the other thing is, I would just like to make an amendment, if I might. As you know, I'm the liaison for the Urban Forestry Committee as well, and that is work that the City Parks Department and Friends of Grand Rapids Parks both do. So I would like to amend the paragraph that begins with creation and execution of a robust park to add this: creation and execution of a robust park and tree stewardship and volunteer program to maintain and care for our city's natural resources and landscapes within the city's park and urban forest system. And in the second paragraph, add park and tree project fundraising.
All right, so that's the amendment. Do we have a support for that amendment to make sure that
Support.
language is included? Thank you, Commissioner. So for the amendment to add, to make sure that it's really clear that it's both parks and trees, I'll call the question on the amendment. Or any other questions about that? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it carries. All right, and so the amended resolution before us is to support this MOU, and so I'll call the question on the full MOU that's amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, thank you both, and thank you to your mighty team. I was out there with my colleague, Commissioner Kelly, at the Kaboom Build last week at Eastern Park. A lot of work goes into that. Not only did Friends raise the money for that, but they worked with our corporate sponsor, and there was well over 150 volunteers out. And as all you can imagine, coordinating and facilitating and making sure something goes off without a hitch with over 100 volunteers is a mighty task. So
It was. Thank you, and thank
Yes.
you to Amway. They sent out all those volunteers. We also had volunteers from the neighborhood. We had a big donation apparently from one of the residents there. Was it Ryan? And a day's worth of work. Unfortunately, the weather was at least breezy. It wasn't bad.
Right.
So
it was hot.
yeah, it wasn't as bad as the humidity.
That's right. All right, thank you both so much.
Thank you all for your
right,
support
thank you.
of parks.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. All right, Commissioners, next that will take us to a resolution authorizing the publication of a 45-day notice of intent to issue bonds for street lighting, duct bank, and primary circuit system improvements.
So moved.
Support.
All right, so commissioners, I'll turn to Tom or Jeff and Tom. We can tag team this one, but just to give you a tee up on this, you'll recall we had a lengthy work session specifically to this, as Tom says, last piece of infrastructure that we need to invest in. At the end of that, we, as a body, said let's move forward with the primary circuit work, knowing that that is failing and needs to be improved. Until we get more information about everything above ground. After that work session, there was internal conversations, and then you may have read in Eric's weekly update and heard from Tom that the intent is to do the primary circuit work and then issue an RFI. So to decouple and separate out the primary circuit upgrade from the actual LED conversion. And so that is what is before us today, but issuing and creating an opportunity for the bonds is critical for the upgrades to the primary circuit. So, Tom, you want to add anything?
You did a wonderful job, Mayor. The only thing that I just may add is that the timing of doing this work is important because we can actually multiply the dollars that we have by going in with vital street work and water and sewer. So instead of we going alone and opening the street to do this work, we can take advantage of that time when the work has been done. So that's why we want to do the work now for the backbone of the electrical, and then begin the conversation about technology and LED.
Great, thank you. Jeff, you want to speak to
I
this?
think you guys covered it. So yes, obviously this is up to 20 million. We don't need to issue bonds. There's no requirement that we do. This starts a 45-day period that we need to wait. And if we do decide to issue, we'd obviously come back with an authorizing resolution in the future. So we're thinking the first issue might be around 9 million. We're still gathering final numbers for the infrastructure pieces and vital streets. And of course, if we replace a failing pole, we'll replace that individual fixture with LED during this phase, but not an entire citywide program. We do intend to go out for an RFI to get all the information on the available technologies.
Great. And then Jeff, for the 120 so buildings that are connected to primary circuit, as we do those upgrades, will there be any interruption in service for them? There will be, Mike, and you'll coordinate that with those businesses and individual buildings. All right.
It's better this way.
All right, Commissioner.
So thank you for the summary. I'm still a tad bit confused because Tom and I did have a chance to talk this morning, and he explained it quite well. But I'm still, it's my understanding that there are still players who can provide both services. And if we're going to go out for an RFI, why wouldn't we wait to see what we get in before we make a decision about the bonding?
So I haven't found any players that would actually pay for the infrastructure pieces, like the conversion from the, was it 2.6? 2.4 to the 7.2, the actual conduit replacements, the manholes that we need to fix, the failing concrete poles, the new conduits and banks we have to put in for vital streets work. I've talked to many vendors, and I haven't found any vendor that's willing to pay for that particular piece of it, because that's a city infrastructure issue. When they want to get involved is when they have payback. So when you replace LED, obviously you have electrical savings, and they typically will use those electrical savings to then pay for that bonding or the debt that they would issue for that particular piece of the project. So we're really trying to eliminate the first phase to just infrastructure pieces and leave out any piece of that particular issue that could potentially be paid for from an outside vendor with electrical savings in the future. So
what if I'm right and there are players and we go down this path as opposed to having the RFI request information, and I mean they'll come forward if they're interested, right? So what's the rush?
There's no rush. This is just again, there's no action here other than to publish a 45-day notice of intent. So if we don't do this, we can't do anything, because either way, none of these companies that I found are going to do this for free. So some of them I've heard will actually pay for it up front, but you still got to make those bond payments. Even with the TELP financing, you issue an RFP to a bank who gives you a loan, you still have to make those payments. So in any case, there's going to be a payment associated with any of this work we're going to do, because no one's going to do it for free. So in my mind, the RFI was more for the intelligence piece, what can go on those 7-pin connectors, and what is the best LED technology and associated parts that could be attached to that.
And I think that's a portion of it. So what is the harm in having the RFI, and so that we can fully understand what's available and who can provide what services and to what degree, and then making the decision about the bonding.
The biggest
Can we do
harm
it
right
that
now
way?
is we're missing out on vital streets projects. So we
Okay.
have projects currently going on in districts that they're gonna close the streets up, finish off the concrete, and for instance, the one on Granville Avenue would cost, we would have to go back in and tear up sidewalks, those types of things, if we were to finish that project and not participate in it with the vital streets work. Because we just don't have the infrastructure, the conduit in place, or the money in the budget to pay for that right now, so.
But, so, I mean, I understand that, and I think that's the concern, that was the concern with the projects from last year, right? So, you know, we created our timeline that we're on, and so we're gonna continuously have roads that are being repaired. And I don't know what the length of time is for the RFI and making that decision, but we're kind of on the tail end of the construction season for roads right now. So if there were a time to do it, it seemed like this would be that, as opposed to rushing through this before we have all of the information in front of us. Now, I get that you know this better than I, and that you've spent more time with this than I have, but I want you to understand where I'm coming from. I feel like I need to know more about what's available to us before we enter into something that is so permanent.
So what we could do is publish a notice of intent. Again, it doesn't require us to issue any bonds in the future to get that 45-day period running. And we
Okay.
could proceed with a concurrent RFI and try to have that timed for the
Before
same
the-
period before we
Okay.
would actually go for the bonding phase. Because that's going to take, once the 45 days is expired and that period has passed, there's an additional period of time to actually get the bonding and everything in place, so.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna go to Commissioner O'Connor and see if there's other questions, and then maybe Mike can I know we talked about this last time, but there's a clear distinction between above ground and underground and the
I'm
primary
satisfied with
circuit.
what he's saying. I don't need any more
Yeah,
comments
okay.
on that.
So, Commissioner O'Connor.
Yeah, I appreciate Commissioner Lanier's comments because I've been just asking a lot of the same questions. I think I'm comfortable with issuing the bonds at this point. I do feel, the opportunity for performance-based incentives is it mostly relates to the above-ground infrastructure, and understanding that the below-ground stuff is really going to mostly be, whether the city does or do they privately contract out, that stuff needs to happen to kind of set the table for the potential improvements in the future. And so I'm comfortable getting going on this. I know that there's also, there's clearly some projects that have already been identified in our neighborhoods that rely on this as well, and so I want to get the ball rolling on this, and I appreciate the staff taking the time and the diligence to come up with the idea of the RFI to really, like we've asked for, give us some more information about it. So I'm ready to go on this now.
Okay. Other commissioners who want to be heard? Commissioner
I
Hart?
just ask Tom this question. Can we just add on to the RFI, to see if anybody would be a part of that first phase? If we have enough time to do it, is it plausible to just add that on there and see if nobody puts anything on it, then we know our answer?
Well, I think there's a difference between an RFI and an RFP in that sense. I mean, we know what needs to be done underground for the most part, so a request for information is not going to essentially provide us anything because there's not a lot to learn, but where I think that's a different, and maybe an RFP is the course of action, and if no one responds, then we know that we just need to do the work.
But I think the RFI will give us the answer to whether they can handle that. So it is, I think they too can respond to that in an RFI. Commissioner?
Well, just one thing, I don't know about the other wards. I don't know that it's happening to the extent that I've experienced it, but over the last maybe 5 years, we've had whole areas, because the circuits are so old, that will go out, and I hear a lot from constituents, and it's not safe when the lights are out at night, and there have been sometimes weeks that go by before we can get to them. So we also saw the pictures and all, so I do feel a real sense of urgency to get that underground work done.
Tom, do you want to add anything? I know you've
Sure.
been working on this for years.
Yeah, I think we can accomplish both. Let's do the notice of intent, as Jeff mentioned, 45 days. We can actually ask the question, if there are any vendors that can do the backbone work. Again, my gut feeling is going to be yes, but it's going to be they got to make a profit to do it, because the cost of the pipe is the cost of the pipe that we're going to purchase. But we can do both and continue to move forward. So we will ask the question.
And have the RFI completed prior to the 45 days, so that we can kind of see that as the decision is coming before us for the next phase.
Yeah, we'll try to get that in on the works as quickly as possible.
Okay,
I'm a
great.
little concerned about it. In order to do an RFI for all the underground, the switch and everything, there would be a lot of design engineering involved and a lot of assumptions to make to do that, because that's straightforward, more electrical work, that's wires, conduits, and other things. So in order to get a response for an RFI or an RFP, there would have to be a significant amount of design work completed ahead of time. So that would be my concern with a 45-day window and no money to do the design, so.
And Mike, you've been working on this for a long time. So
I have.
other cities, at least what I've read is other cities when they do RFIs or RFPs, typically it's for everything above ground. Do you know any city that's done it for the actual primary circuit?
No, normally that would be done, well, in Holland, they would do it with their lines crew, right? Other cities would go out for an electrical contractor like Newkirk or somebody, some big electrical firm that does the high voltage things at the substations.
They do it through a bid process and
And they do it through a
typical-
design bid process.
Right.
So not necessarily an RFI, but I'm certain there's companies out there that for a price would come in and do it all, but it'd be for a price.
All right. Any other questions, commissioners? All
So
right.
how does Mike's comments impact the commitment that you all have made? I'm just trying to make sure we're on the same page before we end this topic.
Where, as Mike mentioned, it were delayed, potentially some of the project that we can begin work. The roads are open, like Granville and other projects. But we can do an RFI for the technology and we can ask the question about why electrical companies are out there through a bid process to identify who can do the work and for how much.
Okay.
My gut feeling is that there will be a cost added to the project. But I'm sure there will be electrical companies out there that can submit a response to the city related to that work. But just know that that will delay the work that needs to be done. As of right now, we have several projects that are waiting to be. They need to know if we're going to close the street and go back. And so know that by delaying the first portion of the work, the cost will increase significantly because we will have to go in alone instead of going in with divider street or water and sewer.
Yeah.
And there is critical projects like Circuit West. They're wrapping up work there. We have not been participating in that project to date because we haven't had the funds. And again, Granville Avenue, they'll be buttoning up that project. So if we don't approve these funds for at least some of this preliminary underground work, it's going to cost us double to go back in and redo it. So for the underground piece, Mike will design it. This is the plan. This is what we typically would do. He would design it. He'll bid that piece to contractors. The RFI, in my mind, is different than the underground actual electrical work, because this is basically work. It's an RFP. You say what contractor can come in and replace this fault, or what contractor can convert our old system to the 7.2 volt, those types of things. The RFI says, okay, now that your infrastructure works and the lights will actually turn on, what's the best technology or what's the best fixture and what everything to put to that. So it's, again, in my mind, it's two separate phases. And again, we've talked to consumers for years. We've talked to a lot of contractors. I've not heard any contractor that says we will come in and do this for free because there's no return on investment for that, for the underground phase. It's just merely replacing this switch with a new switch, kind of an approach.
So I just want to remind you all that this isn't a new request. And frequently I feel when I'm reminding us of a request that I made probably over a month ago, that I'm put in a predicament where this, for lack of a better phrase, guilt trip is thrown about what we can't do because of the timeline. And I made this same request when we first had this conversation during the budget cycle. So had we gotten on that request then and started asking those questions, we would have answers. And then maybe you'd have a different response from me. So just want to make sure that, for the record, this isn't new. So
Commissioners, and I hear your concerns. I know this is a big issue. It's a big infrastructure investment. I feel comfortable after our work session and our conversations last week knowing that similar to other infrastructure improvements, the longer we wait, the more expensive it gets. This is the same thing we dealt with streets and vital streets. We know it costs more to go in after the fact. We know we have a failing primary circuit. We've had multiple failures. We've seen the work. I think bifurcating this into 2 separate phases, doing the infrastructure work and getting that in place while we do an R5 for the above ground work, which is largely the concerns we've heard from the community about. There are partners out there that potentially can work with us and potentially even finance the cost of the above ground work. I think that's a very smart, pragmatic way to respond to improve this infrastructure that we know is failing. And as Thomas said, is really our last piece of infrastructure in the city that we haven't invested in. So I'm going to call the question, knowing that there are concerns still that we need to work through. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we have a resolution scheduling a public hearing to consider an expansion to the neighbors of Belknap Lookout residential parking permit zone.
So moved.
Support.
All right, Josh Naramore, let's talk about parking.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. So as the resolution is, it's to set a public hearing for an expansion to the only current residential parking permit program we have in the Noble neighborhood. Just to give you a little bit of background, the neighborhood actually applied for us to do an analysis to expand the existing permit program in March of 2018. We worked collaboratively with them, conducted all the necessary parking counts, and then actually went to the voting process. The voting process was conducted in June of 2018, and we submitted 153 mail ballots. And as you can see, there was not an overwhelming amount of turnout, even after going out to multiple meetings with the neighborhood association. We had 21 responses with a vote of 11 to 10. Concurrently, the Mobile GR Commission had commissioned staff to look at a review of the rules and regulations under the residential parking permit program. So we were working on a concurrent process to review how all of it was administered, going back to sort of the #1 concern from residents across the city, which is maintaining the low cost and low barriers to entry in the program. So the Mobile GR Commission tabled it at their July meeting, and then in August, they brought it back for action under the new rules and regulations, which will get rid of the voting process and go directly to setting a public hearing and doing the outreach with the neighbors at the City Commission. A couple reasons for that is the administration of the voting process. As you can see, the turnout wasn't as great, but also it's extremely costly to the city and for staff. And so in order for us to maintain that low cost point of $30 a year for the permit program, we did make the modifications to the rules and regulations at the August meeting. Some other changes that we made as part of the rules and regulations, just so you know, is we now have the ability for an income waiver. So if $30 is a barrier of entry, that is no longer. If you can, we're working on the process for how you would document that, as well as a caregiver permit is another change to that as well. And so there are a lot of good reception from the neighbors on some of those changes, and it also now allows us in some of these areas where we have like little one-offs where there's huge pain points for residential parking that are surrounded in industrial areas, which we've had a number on Fox Street and some other streets. This now gives us the ability to do that. So you will be seeing more of these public hearings over the next few months, especially as we're expanding some of the meters into some other neighborhoods. So this is just to set the resolution for September 11th.
All right. All right, Commissioners, any questions or comments? Commissioner?
Yeah, I just appreciate this. Noble was the pioneer in doing permit parking. They're the neighborhood that led this. And I just think that as much effort as was put into the voting process, we need to start doing this as a more data-driven process instead. People just, don't send those postcards back in necessarily. But this is just a little few streets that are going to be added in. And I think the planning, or the Mobile GR Commission felt good about providing the opportunity for those exemptions, including a caregiver permit option. So if somebody has to come into the house to take care of them, they are covered as well.
Great, thanks. All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it carries. All right, well, look forward to hearing more about that on September 11. All right, and next is a resolution setting a public hearing to consider an amendment to Chapter 159 of Title 9 of the City Code entitled Fire Prevention to include adoption of the 2018 edition of the International Fire Code.
So moved. Support.
All right, Mr. Rick Doctor, you want to tell us about this?
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Certainly, as you know, there's no statewide fire code, and so the city adopts the fire code with amendments for every year to provide for the minimum level of fire safety in our construction and our businesses. Every 3 years, there's a new version of the International Fire Code. This is the third time we'll be coming before you to get this adopted, and this year it's the we're asking for adoption of the 2018 edition of the Fire Code. Fire IFC addresses fire safety with new technologies such as carbon dioxide beverage generation systems for many of our restaurants now, photovoltaic array systems on roofs, hydrogen fuel gas systems, and processing and extraction of oils from plant materials, among others, and that is kind of a vital thing coming up as the medical marijuana rules are coming up. So the new code will definitely address that as well. We've done quite an analysis of this. We've also consulted with the building department, and we work side by side in for new construction with us enforcing the regulations from the fire code and then the regulations from the building code, which go hand in hand. There's an one of the amendments, or a couple of the amendments, has to do with coordinating with the mobile food vehicle and recreational fire ordinances, so that they speak the same language, basically. One of the requirements from the fire code is sprinkler protection for places of assembly that are serving alcohol to more than 300 people. And we have quite a few of these in the city. We have some that are profit, some are social clubs, and we are having an informational meeting with these businesses to explain the ordinance proposal and answer any questions that they may have. So we'll get their input by the time the public hearing comes up. And lastly, the adoption of the latest fire code is one of the conditions, or one of the points that we get for moving to an ISO of 1 for the city, which is a large feather in our cap, and it should be part of the consideration. If there are any questions?
All right, questions, commissioners?
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you mention sprinkler systems, are you referring to new buildings or buildings that are being used to operate, such as restaurants? You mentioned bars, but what about old buildings that still exist without sprinkler systems in them? Are you looking at those buildings as well?
So this came into thank you for the question, Commissioner. This came into the code due to instances of large loss of life in existing businesses that did not have sprinklers, or were not required to have sprinklers when they were built. Speaking specifically of the nightclub in Rhode Island that burned, and several of the the largest loss of life incidents that we've had over the years are in these older buildings, many of them wood, that do not have sprinklers. Our new buildings that are proposed for places of assembly, over 100 are required to have sprinklers under our current code. This provision does refer to existing places of assembly that serve alcohol and serve more than 300 people. So it's not as restrictive as the requirements for new restaurants and nightclubs and so forth, but it does cover those that have the potential for a larger loss of life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, I'd like to say that many of these buildings, while they may or may not be historical, certainly the heritage that they represent is important. And during my tenure already in the city, we've lost 2 of these buildings, and So I would be very happy if this was in here so that we could avoid losing any more.
Thank you. All right, any other questions, Commissioner?
Eric, kind of piggybacking on what Commissioner Moody said, so when you go in there to these buildings, you're probably also looking at escape routes? Because I know that's been a problem in some of those big fires.
So we certainly every year for Pulaski Days, we do a very extensive inspection of the Polish halls, for instance. And we have educated them, and over the years they know what the rules are. We make sure that those things are being followed. So we're making them as safe as they can be under the current conditions, certainly. But yes, we are looking at a sprinkler system will allow time for people to escape, and that's where that comes in, where it wouldn't have to go back and make them put in wider doors or wider stairways. With the sprinkler system, that will make it safer for the occupants at that time.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, so this will set the public hearing for September 11th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, Commissioners, a couple more things. We do have a walk-on items for a resolution for a fireworks discharge permit. So can I get a motion to suspend the rules?
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, rules are suspended. This is a resolution approving fireworks discharge permit to Strictly FX for indoor special effects at the Van Andel in connection with Fall Out Boy Mania Tour, which is going to be on September 6th. Any questions?
Boy Mania?
Fall Out Boy Mania.
We don't know what it is.
Yes. Are you going? I presume.
Excited for DJ Casper.
That's right. That's right. All right. So any questions about this? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. Thank you. Couple other things. We do have executive session today with our city treasurer for quarterly performance review. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
Support.
All right. And Commissioner Jones? Voice call.
Yes.
O'Connor?
Yes.
Lanier?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, yes. Okay, so that is going to be at 2 o'clock in the law library. Couple other things, Commissioners. 11:30, we have public safety, so we are going to make it public safety on time today. And that is this side. So we have O'Connor, Jones, and Lanier who serve on the Public Safety Committee. And then we are back in here tonight early at 6:30 so that we can do an official ceremony swearing in our colleague, Commissioner Moody. So hopefully all of you can be back in here at 6:30. We'll have a little reception after that before our 7 p.m. meeting tonight. So with that, Commissioners, did I miss anything, City Attorney? All right. So with that, we are adjourned, and I'll see you downstairs at 2 o'clock. All right. Thank you.